Who's joining me now? Well, I'll tell you who's joining me now. A lady who has put together a book called Digging for Victory. Now, Andrew and myself Andrew has been flicking through your book, Twigs, so a warm welcome to you. And I've been fascinated by this book. Did you get asked to put it together, or is it something that, as a garden historian, it's always fascinated you?
Well, a little bit of both, actually. Originally, it came out of some work I was doing on the history of allotments, because, of course, a lot of allotment history very much tied up with the Dig for Victory campaign. But then a gentleman, the publisher, Ian Bailey, who is really interested in wartime history, he asked me to actually put it together and to publish it, because he thought it would be the most fabulous subject to have.
And then off you went.
Yes.
And it must have been a challenge, but how lovely. What a lovely subject to research.
Well, it was fabulous because I was able to spend a lot of time in places like, the newspaper libraries, the periodical libraries, and finding these wonderful, wonderful images. And what was great for me was that people would say, oh, surely we know all about Digging for Victory, And I'd be able to turn around and say, well, today I was reading about, X and how this happened. And they'd go, oh, no, I never knew that. And so there was this idea that I could encompass not only the oral history and the history we all think we know about Digging for Victory, but also all of those kind of, the posters the government putting out and the propaganda, but also the stuff behind that propaganda, what was really, really happening. And that's what always gets to me, not what we're told, but what was really happening. So that was really great.
And we've been fascinated, haven't we, Andrew, by the adverts? Adverts.
Yeah.
I like this Morteg.
Which is the Morteg one, because they had Morteg, who are tar wash, we should tell your listeners.
Yeah, it's a winter tar wash.
The winter tar wash for your fruit trees. And they had a different advertisement byline nearly every week.
Don't you like, is your Maginot line
the Maginot line. And you can imagine, Morteg washes are your Maginot line. That was a great slogan for how long? And then, of course, they had to totally rewrite that as soon as the Maginot line went. So yes, and they also had things like Morteg tar wash is your aphid raid precautions, as opposed to so it says ARP. And they had one, I think I have several favourites, but in the advertisement, the best running one was cloches against Hitler. And this idea...
Cloches versus Hitler, 29 years experience.
The idea that glass cloches were going to single-handedly beat Hitler is just wonderful. But it was, of course, the idea that you could intercrop and you could have early season cropping and late season cropping using your cloche. And therefore, you would have enough to eat, and therefore you would be able to beat Hitler. And that was how it worked. And advertising was brilliant.
And it does say in that advert, doesn't it? Shows 2 rows of lettuce comfortably housed under a low barn. A catch crop of carrots and onions can be planted down the centre. I mean, it didn't just say buy them because you can grow crops earlier. It actually gave you hints as well in the ads, didn't it?
Oh, yes, they all do. I mean, I think the advertising... Well, I have to be slightly worried, because in these days of, media spin and everything, one doesn't expect somehow to go back to the 1940s and see exactly the same thing happening. But, I'm looking at one under pests, insects and diseases, a couple of adverts there. And one of the adverts is, I suppose, it's for getting rid of rats. And it's headlined, "Kill that rat." And there's a great big picture of a rat, as though you didn't know what a rat looked like. But in fact, this particular rat that you're meant to kill with your pest control chemicals actually has a little Hitler moustache and a Hitler toupee kind of thing. So, the idea is that pests identified with the enemy, very much so.
I do think it's just very, very... It's just a lovely one. I know we mustn't. The trouble is, of course, I've got onto livestock now. Rabbits for food and fur.
Yes, fur and food. Rabbits for fur and food. We have to be quite careful with that section because obviously, nowadays, animal welfare and things, we weren't going to put up any kind of how to build a hutch, which, nowadays you wouldn't be allowed to put a rabbit in sort of thing. So
there was another bit. I mean, I used to keep goats and how it suggests you could keep goats. And I think, you're talking about people keeping things in their back gardens, aren't you? I know. Ridiculous.
There's a wonderful advert for the Radio Times programme that was called The Backyarder, which was encouraging everybody who had even a backyard to keep livestock. And there's a cartoon that somebody did for the Radio Times for it, and it has this tiny little backyard, and in this backyard are 2 beehives, a pigsty, a cow, 6 hens and some rabbit hutches.
Ideal.
But it had a very serious point to it. I mean, who doesn't think of the secret pig,
yes.
Because you weren't allowed to keep, a pig that the government didn't know about, basically. So all of these kind of adverts and the cartoons, there's a rich vein of humour in wartime garden history. We included quite a few humorous cartoons.
You have indeed.
Which I think are brilliant, brilliant cartoons. And they just go to show how embedded in everybody's, mind was this idea of gardening throughout the war.
And then Norma Knight, because Norma Knight has a little cartoon characters that are doing their neighbours have gardens and of course she prevents having tired skin all the way at the bottom, doesn't she?
Yes, with Knight's Castile. I have to say, I often work quite hard. Well, I usually work quite hard, on research and things. And I was reading all of these women's adverts that were relating it back to digging for victory and gardening. And when I read things like Knight's Castile prevents tired skin, I thought, well, I wonder if I can still get that. The women's role was, of course, a tremendously active one. Very, very important. And the government had quite an effort to get this over to women, that, it's really, as the men left, you've got to take over the gardening. And very much 1941, 1942 was the time when the government even started featuring women in their Dig for Victory leaflets, these endless how-to-do-it leaflets that they pushed out. 27 leaflets in all, if anybody's wondering if they've got the complete collection at home. There were actually 27 Dig for Victory leaflets.
Now, the thing about the book as well is that what you've done is you put it into sections and then told the story of why and what each section is about. Yes. And that's the importance. For anybody listening to me chatting about it, it is not just a picture book of ads and cartoons. It is actually the story of the different sections, isn't it, that are important. As I've just mentioned.
I've used a lot of quotes because, it's nice to let the people of the time tell it in their own words, or indeed picking up on things like the Gardener's Chronicle and the Dig for Victory leaflets and, the daily newspapers, what they were all saying. But it is, there's a lot of text in there. I think I could probably tell you exactly how many words if I could remember, but, there's a lot of text around the pictures.
And I would guess, I would think, what a lovely Christmas present, and it's come out just at the right time for that, hasn't it? It's come out this month.
Yes. We're very lucky that it came out now. I have to say, it was, touch and go with the will it get here in time for Christmas kind of thing. Will it all be over at Christmas, we were asking ourselves. So, but yes, it was. It's nice to have it. I think it's an ideal present. People have said to me, because I kind of assumed that people would buy it for, people who were children in the wartime and remember doing the Dig for Victory, for their parents and, picking caterpillars off endless cabbages and growing lettuces on Anderson shelters. But actually a lot of people have said they're buying it for their sons and daughters who, just to show them what happened.
What it was all about.
Yeah, what it was all about. And also because a lot of people now, a lot of younger people, really digging for victory again, or at least digging to beat the financial crisis or climate change or whatever we want to dig to beat. And so, of course, it's really nice to look back and see how what you're doing at the moment,
and it all links
carrying
together.
On the history. Yeah.
Well, Twigs, thanks very much for really. I think you've really described it so well to Andrew and myself and everybody at home listening, because it's a bit of fun. It's a bit of history and a very, very colourful and enjoyable read, and I think that's what you've described today.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much for chatting it through with me.
OK, and the book is Digging for Victory, Gardens and Gardening in Wartime Britain. It's by Twigs Way and Mike Brown. It was published at the beginning of December, and it is £20.